There is a moment, quiet, piercing, irreversible, when a person stops hoping the world will understand them. It's not dramatic. There's no audience, no applause, just silence. The kind that settles in your bones when you realize no one is coming to fix it. No one is staying up at night thinking about your pain. And in that silence, something ancient wakes up. A kind of strength that doesn't beg, doesn't explain, and doesn't need to be seen. That's the moment you stop performing and start becoming. Because the world may be indifferent, but you don't have to be powerless. The Stoics understood this long before us. They believed power begins when expectations die, and in that death, your real life begins. If you're someone who's ready to stop chasing validation and start cultivating inner power, consider subscribing as a quiet vow to yourself, a step toward a life rooted in discipline, clarity, and self-respect. Because here, we don't chase the world's applause. We build what the world can't ignore. Most people carry a quiet fantasy that their suffering is visible, that if they just hurt enough, someone will step in, that maybe if they just word it right, someone will understand. It's a soft hope, often unspoken, built deep into the way we're raised. If I'm in pain, the world will care. But then life happens. Pain is ignored. Tears go unnoticed. The phone stays silent. And that's when something shifts. You begin to see the illusion for what it really is. Not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of how consumed people are by their own chaos. Everyone is battling something you'll never fully see, just like they'll never fully see yours. And if you build your identity on being seen, you will spend your life feeling invisible. That quiet ache of being overlooked, that's not cruelty, that's reality. And if you look closely, it might be trying to teach you something important. When we're young, we believe that pain deserves recognition. We think that if we suffer, someone owes us comfort. But the truth is, life doesn't hand out medals for endurance. It doesn't send angels when you're on your knees. It just moves on. People go about their lives. Friends forget. Strangers scroll. Not out of malice, but because they're drowning in their own problems. That might sound harsh, but harsh doesn't mean untrue. And here's the strange twist. That realization, painful as it is the first step toward becoming free. Because once you stop expecting the world to respond to your pain, you stop waiting. You stop freezing your life in hopes that someone will notice you're stuck. You begin to move for reasons that have nothing to do with applause. Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." But what he didn't say, what you learn through experience, is that most people don't ask because they care. They ask so they can fit you into a box that makes sense to them. They don't see you. They see their idea of you. And when you stop performing for that gaze, you finally start living for something real. There's a kind of sorrow that comes with realizing you're not the main character in anyone's story, but your own. It's not rejection. It's simply gravity. No one owes you understanding. No one is required to hold your hand through the fog. And while that can make the world feel colder, it also makes your inner world burn brighter, because now you're the one lighting the fire. No more waiting for someone to read between the lines of your silence. No more hoping that your quiet breakdown will be noticed and gently mended by someone who just happens to get it. You get it now, and that changes everything. That disappointment, the one that used to sting, becomes something else. It becomes clarity, and clarity is the first real freedom. This is where the Stoics found their strength, not in being untouched by pain, but in refusing to outsource their healing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about your neighbors." In other words, Stop hoping someone else will see your wounds and name your value. The more you focus on being seen, the less you see yourself. And ironically, the more invisible you become. You become noise in someone else's life rather than signal in your own. But when you finally let go of the hope that others will witness your suffering and give it weight, that's when you begin to build something indestructible. Not because you're harder, but because you're clearer. You start noticing how much of your identity was shaped around being seen, around the belief that someone, somewhere, should care. And when they didn't, you took it personally. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. Just because people don't care doesn't mean you're unworthy. It just means they're human, flawed, overwhelmed, distracted, just like you. The game was never about being seen. It was about waking up to the fact that you were always watching. You've been the one living inside your mind this whole time. You've been the only witness to the full weight of your thoughts. That's not a curse, that's a gift, because it means you are the one with the power to change your narrative, not them, you. There's power in being unseen. There's clarity in walking without needing an audience. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And that's what happens when you stop hoping to be seen. You start becoming, not for attention, not for recognition, but because something inside you refuses to stay small. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes your blueprint. The silence that once haunted you becomes your teacher. The solitude that once scared you becomes your home. And when that shift happens, you no longer need to broadcast your wounds. You just carry them differently, not as a burden, but as proof that you kept going. So maybe being overlooked wasn't the tragedy you thought it was. Maybe it was the beginning, the slow, quiet death of illusion, and the birth of something real, something solid, something that no longer seeks validation because it's too busy building something permanent. You don't need to be seen to become something great. You need to see yourself clearly, honestly, without decoration. That's where everything changes. That's where your real life begins. When no one listens, something unexpected happens. You start listening to yourself. Not the surface voice, the one that echoes what others expect from you, but the quieter one underneath. The one you've ignored because it wasn't loud enough to compete with the noise of the world. But in the absence of applause, silence grows roots. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly, not as background noise, but as guidance. It's strange at first, uncomfortable even. You're used to checking your reflection in the eyes of others. But when those eyes turn away, you learn to see yourself from the inside. And that's when something shifts. You begin to move differently, not because someone told you to, not because someone believed in you, but because you decided to show up, without witnesses, without cheerleaders, without someone holding the door open. Self-reliance doesn't arrive in a burst of confidence. It arrives slowly, often disguised as loneliness. You wake up one day and realize no one's checking in, no one's asking how you're doing. And instead of falling apart, you start building. You begin taking yourself seriously, not because others do, but because you've grown tired of waiting. How many times have you paused your growth hoping someone would give you permission to continue? Hoping they'd say it's the right time, the right move, the right direction. But what if that permission never comes? What if no one ever says you're ready? Would you stay frozen forever? Or would you finally claim the authority that was always yours? That's where real power begins, not in being chosen, but in choosing yourself. The world teaches us to seek validation like it's oxygen, but the Stoics knew that peace isn't found in popularity, it's found in discipline. Epictetus said, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." Freedom doesn't come from being supported. It comes from knowing that even when you aren't, you will continue. That even when the room is empty, you'll do the work anyway. And not out of bitterness, but because the work matters, because you matter. When you understand that, showing up stops being a performance. It becomes an act of self-respect. And in that quiet, a new relationship forms, not with the world, but with your own mind. You begin to trust it more. You ask it what it needs. You listen to the fatigue in your body, the pull in your gut, the fire behind your chest. You stop outsourcing your intuition. You stop living reactively. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That awakening doesn't feel like a dramatic breakthrough. It feels like subtle, consistent decisions that build a foundation under your feet. You start keeping your promises to yourself. You go for the walk. You write the words. You say no when something drains you. These aren't loud acts, but they build something no one can see from the outside: trust. And trust in yourself is the currency of freedom. There's a quiet kind of strength that develops when you realize you are your own backup plan, when the silence doesn't scare you anymore, when you don't need to announce your every move or explain your every feeling, when you don't beg for someone to notice that you're trying, because you know the effort you're making, you know the storms you've walked through, you know what it took to still be here, choosing growth instead of collapse. That's not arrogance. That's integrity. You're no longer performing for the world. You're becoming for yourself. There will still be moments of doubt, moments when you wish someone would say, "I see you." But now you don't depend on it. You no longer fall apart in its absence. You carry yourself with the quiet awareness that you've earned your own respect. And that's rare. That's what makes people pause when you enter a room, not because you demanded attention, but because your energy says, "I don't need it." Seneca once wrote, "The greatest empire is to rule oneself." And ruling yourself doesn't look like perfection. It looks like consistency in the face of invisibility. It looks like doing what matters even when no one applauds. It looks like holding your standards high, even when no one is watching. When you build from that place, you're no longer dependent on external structure. You become the structure. You don't collapse when someone pulls away. You don't unravel when someone misunderstands you, because your foundation was never built on their understanding in the first place. It was built on clarity, on quiet decisions made in solitude, on the strength of waking up and moving forward again and again, because that's who you've chosen to become. And this is the most important part. Once you begin to rely on yourself in this way, you stop resenting others for not being who you needed. You release them. You stop waiting for them to return, to notice, to explain. You no longer tie your progress to their presence. You move regardless, not with coldness, but with grace. You become free, not because the pain is gone, but because it no longer defines the path. You carry it, but it doesn't carry you. That's what true self-reliance looks like. Not an absence of need, but a deep inner steadiness that says, even if no one sees me, even if no one comes, even if no one helps, I will keep going. Because this life is mine to live, and I will not wait for anyone to give me permission to become who I was always meant to be. We live in a world that rewards exposure. Every feeling must be shared, every wound displayed, every moment of struggle turned into something others can comment on. The more visibly broken you are, the more attention you receive. But not all attention is healing. Some of it is hollow. Some of it keeps you dependent on being seen as wounded to feel connected. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to perform your pain. You start editing your suffering, packaging it for sympathy. You turn real emotions into content, thinking it will bring you closer to others. But it doesn't. It just makes your healing public property. What was once sacred becomes consumed. What was once your inner world becomes a storyline for others to follow and forget. There's a difference between honesty and emotional performance. One comes from depth, the other from habit. One is quiet, the other rehearsed, and most of us were never taught the difference. We confuse expression with healing. We think that just because we talk about it, we've worked through it. But sometimes, the more you speak of a wound, the more it stays alive. Not everything needs to be narrated. Some things need to be felt, endured, integrated, in silence. The Stoics weren't emotionless, they were composed. They believed in feeling deeply, but without letting those feelings control the trajectory of their lives. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." He didn't mean suppress emotion. He meant, don't let it become a performance. Let it become presence. We've become conditioned to believe that silence is weakness, that if we don't express every feeling, we're hiding. But some things are not meant to be shared. Some parts of your story are sacred precisely because they belong only to you. Keeping something private doesn't mean you're ashamed. It means you're protecting something precious. And that unnerves people, because silence can't be dissected. It can't be pitied or praised. It demands space. It creates mystery. And mystery, especially in a world addicted to access, feels threatening. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury or project. But he also said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." The truth is, not every form of healing needs to be visible. Some of the deepest transformations happen when no one is watching, when you're sitting with your thoughts, when you're choosing not to respond, not to prove, not to explain, when you let your emotions pass through without needing them to be seen, liked, or validated. That's not suppression. That's sovereignty. It's easy to mistake the loud for the strong, but strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and still and completely uninterested in being understood. You don't have to prove your growth. You don't have to narrate your healing in real time. You can keep it to yourself and let the results speak later. And that patience, that refusal to perform, is what gives you power, because it means your peace isn't up for public negotiation. There's a kind of beauty in becoming unexplainable, in being someone who no longer shares every emotional bruise just to receive softness in return. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your struggle, not because you're hiding, but because you've stopped offering your pain as a way to earn connection. When you stop broadcasting your wounds, you stop attracting people who are only there to observe the damage, and slowly you begin attracting people who respect what you've built in silence. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. But once you've faced adversity and grown from it, you don't need to display the scars to justify your strength. You don't need to keep reopening wounds to remind others of what you've endured. You've proven it to yourself. That's enough." The moment you realize your emotions are not a currency for attention, you stop spending them so carelessly. You start guarding your inner life like something rare, because it is. And in that guarding, you find clarity. You start to realize how much energy was spent explaining what didn't need to be explained. You feel how much power was lost in asking to be understood by people who didn't have the depth to understand themselves. You watch how the crowd celebrates vulnerability, but forgets to mention that real vulnerability isn't exposure. It's discernment. It's knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. It's choosing who gets to see the real you and who only gets the surface. You don't need the world to validate your emotions for them to matter. You don't need to turn your pain into art just to justify why it hurts. You can hold that pain quietly. You can heal without display. You can grieve without an audience. And when you do, something incredible happens. You stop fearing the silence. You begin to feel at home inside it, because it no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like return. A return to yourself, a return to what's real. There's nothing wrong with expressing emotion, but when expression becomes a performance, it robs you of your power. Sovereignty begins the moment you choose presence over performance. The moment you stop explaining yourself to feel safe. The moment you realize your peace isn't fragile, it's forged in solitude. And when others can no longer predict you through your emotional patterns, they start to respect the depth they can't access. Not because you became colder, but because you became wiser. You don't owe anyone a front row seat to your healing, and you don't need to bleed in public to prove you're human. Some things are meant to be held close. Some truths are meant to be whispered only to yourself. That's not hiding. That's maturity. And in a world that glorifies noise, that kind of quiet becomes its own form of rebellion, its own form of freedom. Rejection feels personal because it touches something primal in us, the need to belong, to be seen, to be accepted as we are. But often, what feels like rejection is actually redirection. You weren't dismissed because you lacked value. You were pushed aside because your depth couldn't be digested by shallow eyes. Your silence was mistaken for absence, your self-containment for coldness. You were misunderstood not because you failed to express, but because you carry a frequency most people aren't tuned to. That doesn't make you wrong, it makes you rare. The world, for the most part, doesn't recognize nuance. It celebrates what's easy to label, easy to consume, easy to predict. So when you don't fit into those neat boxes, you become inconvenient. And in a world rushing to categorize, inconvenience is often discarded before it's explored. It's easy to internalize that as a flaw. To think, if I were louder, if I smiled more, if I softened my edges, maybe I'd be accepted. But that's the trap. The belief that your value lies in being legible to others. You weren't made to shrink into their comprehension. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who others can easily understand, not who fits the mold, but who you are when no one is watching and you've stopped trying to be approved." That kind of authenticity often comes at the cost of comfort. It invites misunderstanding. It requires solitude. But it also creates space for a deeper kind of transformation, one that isn't driven by applause, but by alignment. There comes a point when you stop interpreting rejection as loss and begin to see it as clarity. Every person who overlooks you, every space that doesn't welcome you, every silence that follows your presence, it all reveals something. Not about your worth, but about where your energy doesn't belong. That insight is priceless. It saves you years of self-doubt. It teaches you to invest where you're valued, not just tolerated. And once you learn that, you stop chasing explanations. You stop wondering why someone didn't choose you. You realize that not being chosen was the blessing, because it gave you back to yourself. There's a quiet revolution that begins when you stop trying to be understood. You begin to redirect all the energy you used to spend on being seen into actually building something. Something that doesn't need to be explained. Something that stands on its own. A body of work, a lifestyle, a discipline. You shift from emotional scarcity, constantly trying to prove your worth, to psychological sovereignty, where your existence is no longer up for debate. That's where your center of gravity moves inward. You're not moved by approval or rattled by dismissal. You become grounded. And grounded people are magnetic, not because they seek attention, but because they carry something stable in a world that spins too fast. People will still misread you. They'll create stories to make sense of your quiet, your ambition, your boundaries. Let them. You're not responsible for correcting every false narrative. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." You are the subject. And most people don't know you. Not really. They see glimpses, fragments. They project, assume, simplify. And while that used to bother you, now you see it for what it is: noise. The moment you let go of the need to correct the noise, your focus sharpens. You get more done. You sleep deeper. You move cleaner. Because now your life is no longer built around being perceived correctly. It's built around being lived truthfully. There's immense peace in that. You stop wasting energy explaining your process, your priorities, your silence. You don't justify why you've gone quiet. You don't explain why you walked away. You don't decode your boundaries. You just live them, not as a defense, but as a natural extension of self-respect. You become someone who moves with conviction, not commentary. And over time, that creates distance, not between you and others, but between you and the noise that once clouded your mind. Rejection becomes revelation when you realize it didn't shrink you. It sculpted you. It showed you where not to go, who not to become, what not to settle for. Every door that closed clarified the direction. Every silence refined your voice. Every betrayal deepened your discernment. What once felt like exile now feels like space. Space to build, space to breathe, space to finally become not someone acceptable, but someone undeniable. And this shift, this movement from wanting to be seen to choosing to become, it changes everything. You stop speaking to be heard and start speaking to build. You stop walking into rooms to prove your worth and start walking into rooms already knowing it. You stop asking if you're too much, too quiet, too intense, and start asking if the space is too small for your truth. You stop apologizing for your depth and start protecting it. That's not arrogance, that's arrival. So, if you've been overlooked, let it be your initiation. If you've been misunderstood, let it be your turning point. You're not here to explain yourself into someone's comfort. You're here to become someone whose presence rewrites the room. And that begins when you finally understand. Rejection isn't the end of your worth. It's the beginning of your clarity. People talk about loneliness as if it's something to escape from, as if the absence of others means the absence of worth. But solitude, when chosen with intention, is not isolation, it's transformation. It doesn't shrink you. It burns away everything that doesn't belong. At first, it feels like silence, a heavy, echoing silence where the noise of the world fades and only your own thoughts remain. But slowly, that silence sharpens. It becomes a mirror that doesn't lie. And what you see there in the absence of distraction is not your weakness, it's your foundation. Solitude doesn't destroy you. It reveals what was always there underneath the noise. The craving for approval, the impulse to please, the subtle performances you didn't even know you were giving. Those things begin to melt away in the furnace of being alone. And in their place, something harder forms, something real. It's in that stillness that you begin to meet yourself honestly. Not the version of you curated for others. Not the identity shaped by expectation or obligation, but the raw material of your mind, your values, your fears. And for many people, that's exactly why solitude is so terrifying. Because when there's no one left to impress, no one left to chase, you're finally left with the truth. No performance, no edits, just you. And while that might feel like loss at first, it's actually the beginning of freedom. Epictetus wrote, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgment of them." In solitude, those judgments become visible. You start to realize how many of your thoughts aren't yours, how many of your fears came from someone else's voice, how much of your identity was built on avoiding rejection rather than seeking truth. This is where the internal alchemy begins. The discomfort doesn't disappear, but it transforms. What once felt like loneliness starts to feel like privacy. What once felt like exile begins to feel like clarity. You start hearing your own voice louder than the world's opinions, and that voice, uncensored, unpolished, unafraid, teaches you how to live. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in a full calendar or a full room. Peace is found in presence, in being able to sit with yourself and not flinch, to feel the weight of your own mind and not run from it. That's not detachment, that's mastery. Carl Jung said, "The man who looks outside dreams, the man who looks inside awakens." Solitude is what forces you to look inward, to awaken. And with that awakening comes a kind of responsibility. You can no longer blame the noise for your confusion. You can't blame others for your stagnation. It's just you now. And that's where the power begins. Because the moment you stop externalizing your life, you reclaim the ability to direct it. You're no longer waiting for someone to come save you, validate you, or guide you. You start building your compass from the inside out. And that compass points to something sturdier than attention. It points to integrity. Most people avoid solitude because they don't like what they feel when everything else is stripped away. But that discomfort is exactly what makes the process necessary. You don't become strong by avoiding yourself. You become strong by confronting what's unhealed, unclear, and uncertain, and doing so without an audience. That's the difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is running away. Solitude is running deeper. And in that deeper place, your resilience is formed. Quietly, consistently, without applause. You begin to make decisions differently, not from a place of, will this be accepted, but from a place of, does this align? You start trusting your instincts more because you've spent time with them. You've listened long enough to separate intuition from insecurity. And that's a level of self-knowledge that can't be taught. It has to be earned. Through silence, through space, through the kind of mental stillness that teaches you how to carry your own weight. That kind of clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. But others feel it. In the way you speak, in the way you move, in the way you don't chase what used to pull you apart. Solitude makes your boundaries sharper. You stop saying yes just to avoid disappointing someone. You stop engaging in conversations that drain your spirit. You learn that no is not unkind, it's honest. And honesty, when cultivated in solitude, becomes a way of living. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to justify your distance or explain your focus. You simply live it. Because you've done the work in silence, and now your energy speaks for itself. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Solitude helps you see the difference. It pulls you out of imagined disasters, false narratives, and inherited fears. It plants you in what's real, and in that soil, something unshakable grows. A sense of self that doesn't shift with trends, a direction that doesn't wobble when misunderstood, a strength that isn't loud, but lasting. When you return to the world after time alone, you come back different. Not distant, but deliberate. Not bitter, but boundaried. You don't speak to be heard. You speak because your words come from stillness, not from noise. You're not easily swayed, not easily shaken, because you know the ground you stand on. You built it yourself, one quiet moment at a time. So no, solitude isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's the training ground for self-trust, self-respect, and self-direction. It's not where life ends. It's where it begins to deepen. And the person who has learned to walk through their own mind, alone and awake, becomes someone the world can't easily move. Because they don't belong to the noise anymore. They belong to themselves. There comes a quiet turning point in every life, where the version of you that once felt essential begins to fall apart. Not with a dramatic crash, but with a slow, undeniable erosion. The old self, the one who needed approval, who bent to fit into spaces too small, who rehearsed words just to be liked, that self begins to feel heavy, outdated, false. You try to carry it a little longer, out of habit, out of fear, maybe even out of guilt. But it drags, it stiffens, and eventually it begins to rot. That's not failure, that's evolution. When something dies within you, it isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's the first breath of something deeper, the start of a more honest existence. At first, it's disorienting. You don't feel quite like yourself anymore, but you also can't go back. The mask doesn't fit. The old patterns feel exhausting. You say less, but what you say carries more weight. You stop explaining, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer feel the need to be understood by everyone. The chase for approval fades, and in its place, something steady begins to grow. You move with more intent. You don't fill silence out of nervousness. You don't perform your personality to make people more comfortable. You simply stand, like a mountain, still, watchful, unmoved. It's strange how people respond when this shift happens. Some distance themselves, others question what changed. They'll say you seem colder, more distant, less fun. What they're really sensing is that you've stopped making yourself available for emotional labor you never consented to in the first place. You've withdrawn from the game of constant reassurance, of being overly palatable. You're no longer addicted to being liked, and that absence makes people uncomfortable, because now they can no longer predict you, and unpredictability in someone who once conformed feels threatening to those still clinging to old versions of who you were. But here's what they don't see. That version of you needed to go. It needed to fall away so you could finally move freely, so you could stop editing your truth to fit someone else's narrative. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. You didn't kill your old self out of hatred. You outgrew it out of truth. You stopped condemning your need for space, your desire for solitude, your craving for a simpler, quieter strength. And in that acceptance, the old self was released, not as a punishment, but as a rite of passage. You don't need to explain this process to others. The people who truly understand won't ask. And those who don't were never meant to walk with this next version of you anyway. You start to notice who respects your silence and who only knew you for your noise. You realize who valued your essence and who only loved your accessibility. That clarity is painful but necessary. It separates the seasonal from the lifelong. It refines your circle. It clears the emotional clutter you were too polite to discard, and it makes space for alignment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's what the disappearance of your old self is. It feels like a loss, but it opens a path where you no longer chase connection, but attract it by being grounded. A path where you don't need to be known by many to feel known within yourself. You don't seek mirrors in others anymore. You've found your own reflection, and it's enough. There's something sacred about becoming someone who no longer needs to announce their change. You don't post about it. You don't campaign for recognition. You just live differently, and the difference becomes impossible to ignore. People feel it in your energy, your decisions, your detachment from petty dramas. They sense a calmness in you that can't be faked, because it came at a cost. It was earned in the quiet dismantling of your former self. In the nights you doubted everything and still chose to continue. In the moments where you wanted to explain, but chose instead to evolve. You're no longer triggered by the same things. You're no longer drawn to the same conversations. You no longer feel the pull to be constantly available. And at first, that feels like loneliness. but then it becomes something else. Freedom, because you realize you were never really connected to those people, those places, or those roles. You were connected to who you had to become in order to stay there. And now that person is gone. Seneca said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." This isn't just a shift in mindset, it's a rebirth. And like all rebirths, it's quiet at first, underrated, uncelebrated, but incredibly real. And with time, it becomes undeniable, not because you announce it, but because you embody it. You become someone who moves with quiet authority, who doesn't need to explain their values because they live them. Someone whose absence speaks just as loudly as their presence used to. Not out of pride, but out of peace. The old self was necessary. It got you here. It learned the hard lessons, absorbed the wounds, fought for belonging. But its time is over. You don't owe it anything except gratitude and release. And now, in its place, you stand clearer, stronger, unapologetically you. No longer looking back for validation, no longer reaching forward in desperation, but grounded, here, now, whole. And that, more than anything, is what makes you impossible to categorize. Because you've stopped being what the world told you to be. You've become who you were always meant to be. True presence doesn't come from how much you say or how loudly you say it. It comes from how little you need to say. There's a kind of quiet power in someone who has stopped seeking validation, a kind of weight in their stillness. You feel it when they walk into a room and don't try to control the space. They simply are. They don't need to announce their presence because their energy carries it for them. They don't push to be noticed, yet they're the one people watch. It's not arrogance, it's not performance. It's the confidence of someone who's no longer hungry for permission to exist. In a world obsessed with appearances, that kind of restraint is rare. And because it's rare, it's magnetic. You begin to realize that real strength is quiet, not hidden, but uninterested in performance. It's the product of someone who has met their fear and sat with it. Someone who has walked through pain without turning it into a show. Someone who doesn't need to posture or puff up because they're not operating from a place of insecurity. They've already faced the abyss and came back without needing to prove anything to anyone. Carl Jung once said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." When you've done that kind of internal work, it changes how you move, it changes how you speak, or how often you choose not to. Because now, silence becomes a statement. You stop reacting to every opinion. You stop defending your every move. You let go of the compulsion to clarify yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, not out of apathy, but out of alignment. You understand now that if someone doesn't feel your value, no amount of words will make them see it. And if someone does feel your value, you won't have to convince them. So you conserve your energy. You speak only when it matters. And when you do speak, people listen. Not because you're louder, but because you're selective. Your words weren't scattered. They were earned. They weren't about being heard. They were about expressing something real, something rooted. There's a power in that detachment. Not the cold kind that pushes people away, but the self-contained kind that doesn't cling to outcomes. When you no longer rely on people to affirm your worth, you free them from the responsibility of carrying your identity, and you free yourself from the constant tug of needing to be liked, validated, or praised. That freedom makes you light, but it also makes you heavy in the eyes of others, because now your self-possession is something they can feel, and it unsettles people who are still measuring themselves through the eyes of others. Because when they meet someone who doesn't need the crowd, they're forced to face the fact that they might still be living for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one that's the essence of commanding without words. You don't try to be impressive. You just embody what you value. And the irony is, when you stop trying to be impressive, you often become unforgettable. Not because you shouted, but because your silence had depth, because your stillness had direction, because you weren't trying to win the room. You were rooted in something deeper than performance. People mistake detachment for disinterest, but true detachment is the highest form of clarity. It means you can engage without being absorbed. You can be present without being performative. You can care without clinging. And that clarity speaks louder than charisma. Because when someone can't be shaken by judgment, can't be baited into overreacting, can't be swayed by flattery or criticism, they start to feel like an immovable force. And we don't just respect forces, we adjust ourselves around them. This is what sets apart the grounded from the attention-hungry. The grounded don't compete for the spotlight because they carry their own light. They're not chasing the next compliment or performance-based connection. They're building something quiet but lasting, something that doesn't crumble when the room goes silent, something that doesn't shift with public opinion. And people notice. They always do. Because in a culture that rewards the loud, the steady become mysterious. The ones who don't need to prove themselves start to feel like they've already proven something far more important: self-mastery. There's no need to chase recognition when you move with intention. No need to explain your pace when you trust your timing. The less you say, the more room others have to feel what you are. And when your presence is built on depth, not performance, it leaves an imprint. Not because it was loud, but because it was grounded. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Quiet power is built on that principle. You decide who you are, and then you live it. Not for applause, but for alignment. So if you've ever wondered why certain people command attention without asking for it, this is why. They don't chase it. They don't ask for it. They simply move in alignment with who they are. And that kind of presence, grounded in inner stillness, always speaks louder than noise. It doesn't need to shout. It just is. There's a strange kind of freedom that arrives the moment you stop needing care. Not because you've become bitter or numb, but because you've finally outgrown the illusion that your strength should depend on how others treat you. It's the point where a subtle but permanent shift happens inside. The world no longer has the same power to shake you. Its silence doesn't unsettle you. Its applause doesn't seduce you. You begin to move from a different place, from a center that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't beg to be seen, and doesn't fall apart when it's ignored. That's the paradox. You only gain real power when you stop needing to be rescued, not from pain, but from the discomfort of being alone in your truth. For a long time, we're taught to believe that care from others equals safety, that we must be heard to feel real, understood to feel valid, held to feel whole. But there's a deeper truth underneath all of that. The truth that power isn't something given to you by attention, love, or recognition. It's something built in silence, brick by brick, with the choices you make when no one's watching. That's why once you stop craving the emotional resources of others, something remarkable happens. You start becoming your own source. And when you do, you realize you were never powerless. You were just waiting for permission to be strong. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's where this new form of power begins, with acceptance. Not just of your strengths, but your fears, your darkness, your disappointment, your unmet needs. You accept that maybe they won't ever understand you, that maybe no one will love you exactly the way you've always wanted. And rather than fight it, you exhale. You stop resisting what is. You stop trying to control how others feel about you. And in that surrender, a new kind of control emerges. not over people or outcomes, but over yourself. You stop explaining things that don't need to be explained. You stop handing out pieces of your soul in exchange for temporary comfort. You no longer make yourself smaller to be digestible. You no longer bend your voice to avoid tension. You simply stand in your life, unfolded, unedited, and let the chips fall where they may. Some people will fall away, some will come closer, but none of that changes who you are, because now you are the one who defines your worth. You've stopped outsourcing it. You've stopped chasing love as proof of existence, and because of that, you're no longer fragile. You're rooted. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you wall yourself off or walk through life untouched. It means you stop expecting external care to fix what only internal clarity can. You stop making your healing a group project. You understand now that peace is built alone, and it's maintained by protecting that solitude, not by constantly inviting others into it to validate your progress. You no longer need to be mirrored in someone else's eyes to know you're whole. The mirror is now internal, and it doesn't distort. You also stop fearing disconnection, because the deepest connection, the one with yourself, has already been established. That's what makes you strong, not cold, not distant, but self-contained. People can come and go. You can love and be loved, but your foundation doesn't shake with their presence or their withdrawal. That's not detachment from life. It's engagement on your own terms. And that's what true autonomy looks like. You stop being a guest in your own mind. You become the architect. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When your attention is no longer hooked by who notices you, who cares, who claps, or who stays, you redirect that energy inward, not in isolation, but in intention. You start asking different questions, not "why did they treat me that way?" but "what can I build with what's left?" You start turning your pain into discipline, your silence into strategy, your disappointments into design, because you're not stuck anymore. You're not frozen waiting for the next wave of validation to carry you forward. You've become the current. This kind of power, this grounded, quiet, untouchable strength, it's not something that's handed to you by good fortune or the right people. It's forged in the moment you stop needing others to meet you, and instead meet yourself where you are. And from that meeting place, something more honest rises. A self that's no longer edited to please. A direction that's no longer influenced by fear of being misunderstood. A life that's finally yours, not borrowed from others' expectations, but owned. You become someone who moves with clarity, not desperation. Someone who can hold space for their own emotions without leaking them into every interaction. Someone who doesn't crumble when the applause stops, because you never built your rhythm around their noise. You don't need to be followed to feel like you're going somewhere. You know where you're going. And that's why people start to feel your gravity, not because you demand it, but because you no longer need it. And that's rare. So when you stop needing care, don't mistake that shift for loss. It's a return, a reclaiming, a sharpening. You've taken back the most important thing, the ability to guide yourself, to walk through disappointment without folding, to be unseen without disappearing, to be misunderstood without self-abandonment. That's where everything changes. That's when life starts to move in your favor, not because the world suddenly understands you, but because you've stopped needing it to. And in that space, you become something unshakable, not because you were born that way, but because you chose it again and again, until your mind finally believed you were already enough. You don't need to be seen to become powerful. You don't need to be understood to become whole. The moment you stop waiting for the world to care is the moment you begin to shape yourself into something it can't ignore. Quietly, fully, unapologetically. Thank you for walking this path with me today and for being a part of Stoic Journal. If this message spoke to you, there's another video on your screen right now that will take you even deeper. Watch it next. Keep building. Keep becoming. What if I told you that most people today are living in quiet defeat, not because they lack talent, but because they lack mental strength? We scroll, we compare, we envy, and then we wonder why we feel stuck, weak, or lost. We chase comfort, yet feel exhausted. We avoid pain, yet suffer daily. The truth is hard. Comfort is killing us slowly, while struggle, though harsh, holds the seed of real power. But here's the twist. The ancient Stoics knew this long before smartphones, social media, or self-help books. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just a quote. That's a weapon, a mindset, a way to live in chaos and remain unshaken. Stoicism doesn't make life easy. It makes you unstoppable. In this video, we're diving deep into 8 brutal Stoic laws that will force you to level up, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Not inspirational fluff. Real talk, real change. Each of these laws is drawn from raw Stoic truth, battle-tested in ancient Rome, and still painfully relevant today. Before we begin, I need you to do one thing. If you're serious about growth, don't just sit back and watch this like another motivational clip. This isn't background noise. This is your wake-up call. Like this video right now. Drop a comment as we go through, especially when a point hits hard. Share it with someone who needs this. And most importantly, don't skip any part, because even one missed law could cost you clarity or courage in a moment that matters most. Let's begin. Number 1. Embrace discomfort like a friend. We've been taught to run from pain, but the Stoics taught the opposite. Run toward it, eyes open. Think about your greatest growth moment. Did it happen when you were comfortable, relaxed, and everything was easy? Or did it happen when life punched you in the face and you had to choose, rise or stay broken? Marcus Aurelius faced wars, betrayal, illness, and still led with calm. He didn't avoid discomfort. He invited it to shape him. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. That's not poetic fluff. That's law. Every obstacle, a chance to sharpen your will. Every delay, a test of patience. Every rejection, a teacher of resilience. Modern life tells us, avoid pain. Stoicism whispers back, train for it. That cold shower, a test. That hard conversation, a path. That gym session when you're exhausted, that's where your character is being carved. The Stoics believed that by choosing controlled discomfort, you prepare for the chaos of life. So, when the storm hits, you're already built for it. Seneca, another Stoic, practiced sleeping on the floor, eating plain food, wearing old clothes, not out of self-hate, but self-training. Why? Because then, when life strips away your comfort, you're not shocked. You're ready. And here's the truth. Discomfort is not your enemy. It's your mirror. It shows you who you really are, and more importantly, who you're becoming. We avoid small pain today, only to suffer bigger pain tomorrow. But if you lean in, walk through that fire with awareness, something wild happens. You stop fearing the pain, and that's the beginning of freedom. From now on, see discomfort like a sparring partner. It might bruise you, but it's building you. Choose one small discomfort today and do it. No debate, cold shower, deep talk, sit with boredom. Remind yourself, this is how warriors are forged, because the only way to become unstoppable is to stop running. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Discomfort is my training ground. Number 2, stop being owned by your emotions. How often do your emotions control your day? Someone says something rude, and you snap. Plans change, and your whole mood shifts. You feel lazy, so you skip the gym, the work, the discipline. It's not just you, it's all of us. But the brutal truth: if you are ruled by your emotions, you are a slave to them. And the Stoics believed that slavery to emotion is worse than chains on your wrists. Epictetus, a former slave turned Stoic teacher, said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. They can anger you only when you permit yourself to be disturbed by them." Let that sink in. That person who cut you off in traffic, you just handed them your peace. That breakup, you handed it your identity. That one rude comment online, you gave it your joy. You see, Stoicism doesn't ask you to ignore emotions. It teaches you to observe them, understand them, and respond instead of react. The difference between a child and a Stoic: the child throws a tantrum. The Stoic sits in the storm and thinks. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, wrote in his private journal, which became Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That's the kind of control we rarely talk about, the power to not be shaken by what doesn't deserve our energy. And yes, it's brutal, because it means you can't blame others anymore. You can't say, "He made me mad," or "She ruined my day." You realize it's all you. The reaction, that was your choice. But here's the empowering part. You can choose again. You don't have to be a slave to your feelings. You can feel anger without acting in anger. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel sadness without drowning in it. That's emotional strength. That's Stoic freedom. Try this next time you feel triggered. Pause, don't act. Breathe. Ask, is this feeling useful right now? Respond with intention. This isn't being robotic, it's being in control. When you stop being owned by your emotions, you become clear, calm, powerful. You show up steady, and people notice. You don't get pushed around by every little thing anymore. You're grounded. And in today's emotionally chaotic world, that kind of stability, it's rare, it's magnetic, it's unstoppable. Real growth begins when you stop being a puppet and start being the master. Number 3, stop expecting fairness. Life owes you nothing. One of the fastest ways to suffer is to expect life to be fair. Let that settle for a second. You work hard, and someone lazier gets the promotion. You love deeply, and they walk away. You do the right thing, and still get punished. And then the anger comes. This isn't fair. But here's the Stoic truth. Fairness is a myth we create, not a rule of the universe. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You can commit injustice by doing nothing." Even he, Emperor of Rome, saw injustice every day. But instead of whining, blaming, or spiraling into despair, he grounded himself in one unshakable idea. Life is not about fairness. Life is about strength. The Stoics never expected life to treat them kindly. They expected pain, loss, betrayal, change. And because they expected it, they were ready for it. Let's get brutally honest. Fairness is a beautiful idea, but it can also make you weak if you cling to it too tightly. When we say, "This isn't fair," what we're often saying is, "I don't like how this feels, and I don't want to deal with it." But here's the law. You don't grow by expecting fairness. You grow by facing reality and moving forward anyway. Look around. Bad things happen to good people. Evil people sometimes win. Effort doesn't always equal reward. That's not negativity. That's life. Now here's what separates the average from the unstoppable. The average person waits for fairness. The Stoic, they build power within so strong that nothing external can break them. This doesn't mean you become cold or heartless. It means you stop waiting for the world to treat you right and start treating yourself right, regardless of how the world behaves. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, especially when life seems unfair." Here's what you do instead of complaining. You use the pain as fuel. You build skills so strong they can't be ignored. You love deeply without expectation. You face betrayal and walk forward with dignity. The Stoic approach is radical responsibility. Not because it's always your fault, but because it's always your move. You don't get to control how life hits, but you always get to control how you respond. And that response, that grounded, calm, warrior-like response, that's what makes you unstoppable. Fairness is not promised, but freedom is earned, one powerful choice at a time. Number 4, focus on what you can control. Let go of the rest. The Stoics believed that your power lies in a very small, specific place, inside your control. Everything outside of that, let it go. Epictetus said it simply, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Here's the trap most people fall into. They try to control other people. They try to predict the future. They obsess over outcomes, and then they wonder why they feel anxious, powerless, angry. But let's break it down. What is truly under your control? Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, your response. Everything else? Opinion, chance, uncertainty. You can't control the weather, but you can control how you dress. You can't control whether people like you, but you can control how you treat them. You can't control the economy, but you can control how much you learn, how you spend, how you prepare. That shift in focus is massive. It gives you back your power. Instead of being pulled in 100 directions by things you can't affect, you stand strong, centered in your own actions. Imagine you're in a storm at sea. The Stoic doesn't scream at the wind. He grabs the wheel and navigates the ship. That's what makes you calm when others panic, focused when others complain, disciplined when others drift. It's not about pretending the outside world doesn't matter. It's about deciding what gets your attention. And 90% of what people worry about, completely outside their control. Here's a simple practice. Every time you feel stressed, ask yourself, is this within my control? If yes, act. If no, let go. Simple, yes. Easy, nah. Powerful, absolutely. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And when you live this, people notice. You become unshakable, not because you control everything, but because you control yourself, no matter what happens. Number 5, practice voluntary hardship to build unbreakable will. In a world addicted to comfort, discipline becomes a superpower. The Stoics didn't wait for life to challenge them. They challenged themselves first. Not to suffer, but to strengthen. Not to punish, but to prepare. Seneca once wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition I feared?'" This was voluntary hardship, a chosen moment of discomfort in order to build a mind that wouldn't crack under pressure. Now think about this. Most people today avoid discomfort at all costs. They never skip a meal. They never sit in silence. They never go without convenience. But what happens when life does get hard? They break. They panic. They blame. The Stoic, they've already trained for the hard days. They've already practiced hunger, fatigue, rejection, boredom, struggle. That doesn't make them invincible, it makes them adaptable. You don't build willpower by watching motivational videos. You build it by doing the thing you don't want to do, on purpose. Voluntary hardship could look like this: fasting for 24 hours to remind yourself that you control your urges. Taking a cold shower when your mind screams no. Saying no to a luxury you can afford, just to sharpen your self-restraint. Waking up early to train when your body craves the bed. These small choices, they stack, and over time, you become dangerous. Not because you're cruel to yourself, but because you realize the truth. Comfort doesn't make you stronger, challenge does. And when hardship comes, as it always does, you don't run, you smile, because you've already walked the fire by choice. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plagues, wars, and betrayals, yet he wrote with calm and clarity. Why? Because hardship wasn't a shock to him, it was expected. And when hardship is expected, it loses its power to paralyze you. So instead of asking, how can I make life easier? Ask, how can I become stronger? Practice being hungry, practice being alone, practice being cold, tired, rejected, bored, and remaining focused through all of it. Because one day, life will throw more at you than you think you can handle, and when it does, you'll rise. Number 6, detach from outcomes. Fall in love with the process. We've been taught to obsess over results. Get the job, win the deal, hit the goal, earn the money, be admired. But Stoicism flips the script. Detach from the outcome and master your process. Why? Because the result is never guaranteed, but your effort is always within your control. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." When you cling to results, you set yourself up for suffering. You hit the gym for a week, don't see abs, you quit. You launch a project, it flops, you feel worthless. You love someone, they leave, you collapse. But what if instead you fell in love with the work itself? The showing up, the writing, the building, the thinking, the learning, the effort. That's the Stoic path, because when you focus on the process, you always win, even if the result isn't what you imagined. And here's the kicker. Ironically, when you let go of needing the outcome, you start to achieve more, because you're not desperate, you're not emotional, you're not driven by validation, you're grounded in action. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Meaning, stop obsessing over what might happen. Just work your process with courage, right now. If you're a writer, write, not to go viral, but to sharpen your mind. If you're an athlete, train, not just to win, but to master your body. If you're building something, build, not for applause, but for pride in the effort. The moment you tie your worth to outcomes, you become fragile. The moment you tie your worth to discipline, intention, and focus, you become unstoppable. Here's a Stoic mindset shift. Show up like the result is already done, and you're just enjoying the craft. Whether you fail or succeed, bonus. You've already won, because you did the work. Number 7, embrace death. Live with urgency and purpose. Most people live like they're going to live forever. They waste time, delay dreams, stay stuck in bad habits and worse relationships. But the Stoics meditated on death, not to be dark, but to wake up. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." That's not fear, that's freedom. It's the realization that life is short, and we don't get to choose when it ends. So every moment wasted is a moment we never get back. Let that hit you. You don't get to wait for someday. You don't get to keep telling yourself, "I'll do it later." You don't get to assume that tomorrow is guaranteed. The Stoics practice something called memento mori. Remember you will die. They didn't say it to be grim. They said it to stay focused, present, and intentional. Because when you truly realize that your time is limited, you stop wasting it. You stop scrolling for hours. You stop arguing over meaningless things. You stop tolerating mediocrity, and you start creating, loving, moving. Now, not later. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." You might not control how long you live, but you do control how deeply you live. And the most dangerous lie is this: there's plenty of time. Nah, there isn't. That risk you keep avoiding, that business you keep postponing, that person you keep meaning to forgive, that change you keep saying you'll make next year. This is your moment. This is your time. The Stoic doesn't ignore death. He stares it in the face and says, "You will not catch me sleeping on my life." This awareness doesn't make you anxious. It makes you alive, because the person who truly remembers death speaks truthfully, loves openly, works with urgency, lets go of ego, stops fearing failure, because the ultimate failure is a wasted life. Live like you're on borrowed time, because you are. And when you do, you become magnetic, focused, powerful. You don't chase cheap validation. You move with purpose. People feel it. You feel it. Number 8, be a warrior for virtue, not approval. Let's be honest, most people live for likes, praise, attention, applause. But the Stoic doesn't move for the crowd. The Stoic moves for virtue. Marcus Aurelius said, "Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter." In other words, live with honor, even if no one sees it. Speak the truth, even if no one claps. Keep your word, even if it costs you. Train hard, even when nobody's watching. That's virtue. That's what builds a soul that can't be bought. And it's not about being perfect, it's about being principled. Now, here's the hard part. Doing the right thing is often the hard thing. It's easier to lie. It's easier to impress than to be authentic. It's easier to chase approval than to stand alone. But every time you choose what's right over what's easy, you sharpen your edge. You become someone your future self can admire. You build an identity that no one can take from you. Seneca reminds us, "I will govern my life and thoughts as if the whole world were to see the one and read the other." That's power. That's a life that doesn't crumble under pressure because it's built on integrity. In a world of image, the Stoic is real. In a world of noise, the Stoic is still. In a world of performance, the Stoic is genuine. You want to be unstoppable? Don't live for praise. Live for your values. Live in a way that, even if stripped of status, money, followers, you'd still stand tall. Because the moment you stop needing the crowd, you become the kind of person they follow anyway. Be the warrior for what's right, not what's popular. And even if you walk alone, walk like it's the only path that matters. If you've made it this far, it means something deep inside you is ready to evolve, to leave behind the distractions, the weakness, the emotional chaos, and step into something greater. Not perfection, but power. Not domination over others, but mastery over yourself. That's the Stoic path. It doesn't offer you comfort. It offers you clarity. It offers you direction. It offers you a life of meaning, even when the world around you is crumbling. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. They didn't write for a world that was easy. They wrote to survive storms, battles, betrayals, and death with dignity. They taught us that true strength isn't in muscles or money. It's in the man who keeps his word, the woman who faces fear without flinching, the soul who does the right thing, especially when it's the hard thing. You don't need to wait for motivation. You don't need the perfect moment. You just need to begin right now. Train your mind. Expect struggle. Detach from outcomes. Hold your principles. Live like your time is running out, because it is. And the beautiful part, you don't need applause. You don't need praise. You don't need anyone to understand you. Because when you walk the Stoic path, you become unshakable from within. And that kind of strength, it's rare, it's real, and it's yours. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I am becoming unshakable day by day. Now, if this message resonated with you, if something inside you lit up, if you felt a spark of truth, do not keep it to yourself. Like the video, comment your favorite law, share this with someone who's on their journey, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are building a community of thinkers, warriors, and real ones who want more than noise, who want to live with purpose. And remember, do not skip any parts of your life. It's all training. It's all transformation. Keep showing up. Keep choosing strength. And don't stop until you become unstoppable. When everything you built begins to crumble, there's a silence that follows, a silence louder than any chaos. You watch your plans fall apart, your identity unravel, and the life you thought you controlled dissolve like smoke. In that moment, something inside you dies, but something greater starts to breathe. This is not the end, it's the clearing of the battlefield. Loss strips away the unnecessary, and what remains is raw truth. It's where Stoicism stops being a philosophy and becomes survival. You see, when you've lost everything, you're no longer protecting illusions. You're standing naked in front of life itself, and for the first time, you can see clearly. That's where the real lessons begin, not in comfort, but in collapse. In this video, we'll walk through the ashes together, how to rebuild when there's nothing left, how to find discipline in ruin, and how to rise without bitterness. The final truth will reveal why losing everything might be the greatest gift you'll ever receive. If you're enjoying the videos on this channel, hit like, leave a comment as we go, and subscribe to join a community of warriors seeking real growth. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Number 1. The fall is a teacher. When everything collapses, the mask of certainty falls with it. The people who once applauded you disappear, and the world that seemed solid turns to mist. You learn that stability was never real, only borrowed time. Loss rips the stage apart and drags you backstage to see the truth. You were never in control. The Stoic does not curse the collapse. He studies it. He knows that every fall is a classroom where illusions die and wisdom is born. At first you resist. You fight to restore what was, to cling to the comfort of familiarity. But the harder you hold, the more it slips away. The universe does not negotiate with attachment. It breaks what refuses to bend. You're not being punished. You're being purified. What shatters under pressure was never meant to last. And what survives? That's what's real. The rest was decoration. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." The Stoic understands this as law. Without adversity, there is no reflection. Without reflection, there is no mastery. Comfort blinds, but loss opens the eyes. It makes you question everything, your motives, your worth, your strength, and in that questioning, you begin to awaken. When you fall, you meet yourself for the first time without the disguise of success. You see the parts of you that only struggle can reveal, the courage that doesn't need applause, the endurance that grows in silence. Pain becomes a mirror, showing you what truly matters. And when you finally stop running, you realize the fall was not destruction, it was direction. Life is merciless in its mercy. It breaks you to show you where you were already broken. It takes from you to prove what was never yours. The Stoic calls this divine correction, the universe removing false attachments so the soul can stand unshaken. What feels like loss is often liberation. What looks like ruin is often renewal disguised in fire. So when you fall, don't rush to rise. Sit in the dust. Study it. Let the lesson carve itself into your bones. The fall is not your enemy, it's your mentor. You'll know you've learned when you can thank it, not for what it took, but for what it left behind. Number 2, you own nothing but yourself. Everything you think you possess, money, love, titles, exists on loan. Life gives and life reclaims. One day, everything external will turn to dust, and the only thing left will be the state of your mind. The Stoic lives knowing this. He walks through the world lightly, holding what he has with open hands. Ownership is an illusion. Stewardship is the truth. When loss comes, it reveals your true wealth, the inner fortress of thought, discipline, and virtue. The man who owns himself cannot be bankrupt. You may lose comfort, but not character. You may lose applause, but not integrity. The Stoic invests only in what cannot be stolen: clarity of thought, mastery of emotion, peace under chaos. These are treasures no thief can touch. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." That's the blueprint of freedom. The world sells you chains wrapped in luxury, convincing you to measure worth in what you hold. But every possession becomes a master if you cling to it. The Stoic breaks this spell by detaching, not out of coldness, but out of courage, the courage to live free from dependence. When you realize you own nothing, gratitude multiplies. Every sunrise, every breath, every moment of laughter becomes a gift, not a right. You stop chasing more and start protecting less. Simplicity becomes strength, not sacrifice. You finally see that minimalism is not emptiness, it's space for truth. The man who owns himself stands calm in every storm. He doesn't crumble when fortune shifts or people vanish. His peace is not rented from approval or circumstance. It's built from within, brick by brick, through self-command. The Stoic learns to guard this inner property more fiercely than gold, because it defines his existence. So hold nothing too tightly, not even your own identity. Let life give and take without fear. Your mind, your virtue, your will. That's all you ever truly owned. Protect that with everything you have, because when all else fades, that's what will rebuild your world from nothing. Number 3, pain clears the noise. Pain doesn't ask for permission. It enters like a storm and tears down everything false. When comfort is gone, you stop pretending you're fine. You see what you've been avoiding, what you've been hiding behind distractions and comfort. The Stoic doesn't run from pain. He studies it. He knows that in the silence after suffering, truth finally speaks. What once seemed unbearable becomes the only honest teacher left. You can't hear wisdom when you're drowning in pleasure. You can't grow when everything around you is designed to keep you numb. But when pain strips away the noise, you meet the voice of your own mind, raw, trembling, but real. That's the sound of awakening. Every discomfort, every heartbreak, every failure is not a curse, but a clearing. The noise leaves, and what remains is focus. Epictetus said, "Difficulties show what men are." That's not poetry, it's anatomy. Pain reveals structure. It shows where your spine bends and where it breaks. It reveals the difference between endurance and avoidance. The Stoic does not pray for less pain, but for more clarity through it. Because pain doesn't destroy the strong, it exposes the weak parts that must grow stronger. Think about how you react when the world hurts you. Do you drown in complaints or rise in control? Pain tests not your luck, but your leadership of self. The body trembles, the mind resists, but beneath the storm, something solid watches quietly. That watcher, your reason, that's the true you. The Stoic learns to stand there, inside that stillness, even when everything else shakes. Pain refines like fire. It burns away ego, false pride, and fragile ambition. It leaves behind only what's real, the metal of your soul. When you emerge from that furnace, nothing outside can wound you in the same way again. That's not numbness. That's awareness. You become untouchable because you've touched the depths of your own endurance. So don't curse your pain. Sit with it. Listen to what it's telling you about who you are and what still holds power over you. Every ache has a message. Every scar is a map. Follow them inward. When the noise is gone, the truth you've been seeking will finally have space to speak. Number 4, detach, don't despair. Despair is the soul clinging to what's already gone. You lose something, a dream, a person, a version of yourself, and the mind builds prisons made of why. The Stoic doesn't drown there. He steps back. He sees the destruction, feels the pain, but doesn't become it. Detachment isn't denial, it's discipline. It's the art of staying awake when everything inside wants to collapse. Most people confuse letting go with losing. They think detachment means not caring, but it's the opposite. It's caring correctly. The Stoic detaches from outcomes, not from effort. He does what he can with all his heart, then releases what's beyond control. That's not indifference, that's power. It's the only way to walk through a burning world without turning to ash. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." That's the Stoic paradox, to love deeply and still let go freely. Despair comes from demanding permanence from what was never designed to last. Detachment restores harmony between heart and reality. The moment you stop begging the universe to give back what it took, you start to heal. The energy once wasted on resistance becomes fuel for renewal. You stop seeing endings as injustice and start seeing them as evolution. Detachment transforms you from a victim of time into a partner of it. You move forward, lighter, quieter, unshaken. Every attachment carries a shadow of fear, the fear of its loss. Detachment dissolves that fear by confronting it head-on. You no longer say, "I can't live without this." You say, "I can live regardless." That's freedom. The Stoic doesn't kill emotion, he commands it. He knows that peace is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of response. So when the world takes something from you, breathe. Don't chase what's gone. Don't curse what's broken. Let it pass through you like wind through an open hand. You're not losing, you're clearing space. Detach, not to escape life, but to see it clearly again. And from that stillness, rebuild without despair, without fear, and without chains. Number 5, gratitude rebuilds faster than regret. When everything falls apart, the mind searches for someone to blame, a face, a choice, a moment that could have gone differently. Regret feeds that hunger. It tells you that peace lives in rewinding time. But the Stoic knows time doesn't bow to sorrow. The only direction left is forward. Gratitude becomes the tool to build from ashes, the light that refuses to die when everything else does. Regret chains you to ghosts. It keeps your energy trapped in stories that can't be rewritten. Gratitude, on the other hand, brings you back to the present, to the breath, to the lesson, to what still stands unbroken. When you thank life even for the pain, you steal power from despair. The Stoic doesn't ignore his suffering, he thanks it for sharpening his sight. Pain with gratitude becomes strength in disguise. Seneca wrote, "He who receives a benefit with gratitude repays the first installment on his debt." Gratitude is not softness, it's repayment to life for keeping you alive. When you start to see what remains instead of what's gone, you begin to understand resilience. You learn to rebuild, not from bitterness, but from blessing. The ruined house becomes sacred ground when you choose to be thankful inside it. Gratitude doesn't deny loss, it reframes it. It whispers, "This too served me." It turns every ending into an education, every failure into a teacher, every heartbreak into a purifier. The Stoic looks at his scars and gives thanks, not because they were pleasant, but because they made him real. Gratitude transforms pain into clarity and survival into creation. Without gratitude, even success feels empty. You reach the mountaintop and still ache for more, because your eyes only see what's missing. Gratitude heals that blindness. It roots you in enoughness, in the quiet realization that what you have right now is abundance. The Stoic doesn't count possessions, he counts awareness, and that awareness turns scarcity into serenity. So when loss tries to turn you bitter, thank it instead. Thank it for showing you who you are without illusions. Thank it for returning you to yourself. Gratitude doesn't change the past. It changes your posture toward it, and that shift alone rebuilds faster than any regret ever could. Number 6. Discipline is your new shelter. When everything external burns down, you need a place to live, not in comfort, but in order. Discipline becomes that home. It's not glamorous or warm, it's solid. The Stoic knows that routine saves him when motivation dies. Rising early, moving the body, guarding the mind, these acts become the roof over his chaos. When the world turns wild, structure becomes salvation. You can't control what you've lost, but you can control your habits. Every small act of discipline is a declaration, "I still govern myself." That's what Stoicism demands, self-command in the ruins. When emotion floods the mind, discipline keeps it steady. It doesn't ask how you feel, it asks what must be done. That's how order is rebuilt, through repetition, not inspiration. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. B1 discipline is that command embodied. It's action over argument, persistence over panic. When you wake early and face your duties despite exhaustion, you remind your soul who's in charge. Discipline doesn't remove pain, it organizes it into purpose. It teaches you that control isn't external. It's daily deliberate choice. The undisciplined man seeks escape. He drinks, scrolls, and distracts himself from the emptiness. The Stoic builds instead. He uses every sunrise as a chance to repair himself. Each repetition, each routine becomes a brick in the fortress of his mind. While others drown in emotion, he rises through effort. Work becomes worship, focus becomes faith. Discipline is not punishment, it's preparation. It trains you to stand steady when fortune turns again. You become predictable to yourself in a world that isn't. That's freedom. Because the disciplined man doesn't need the world to be stable. He carries his stability within him. He is unmoved, not because life is easy, but because he is anchored by his own consistency. So when comfort disappears, don't chase it. Build discipline instead. Let it shelter you through storms. Every act of order defies chaos. Every task completed strengthens the walls around your peace. The Stoic rebuilds his world not with miracles, but with habits. And from that structure, he rises again, not lucky, not saved, but steady. Number 7. Identity must burn to be reborn. There comes a moment when the person you were no longer fits the life ahead. You feel it, that silent friction between what's dying and what's waiting to be born. The Stoic doesn't resist this fire, he walks into it. He knows that clinging to a past self is the surest way to stay trapped. Renewal demands surrender. Who you were must burn for who you're meant to be, to breathe. You built an identity on titles, relationships, possessions, a fragile sculpture of approval and fear. When loss comes, that sculpture shatters. It hurts because it was never real. You mistake the ashes for tragedy, but they're actually proof of liberation. The Stoic sees identity not as something to defend, but to outgrow. Every ending of the self is the beginning of authenticity. Epictetus said, "It is not death or pain that is to be feared, but the fear of pain or death." The same applies to transformation. You're not afraid of change. You're afraid of the emptiness between selves. That void, that uncertain space, is where rebirth happens. The Stoic stands there willingly, stripped, unarmed, uncertain, because he trusts that fire refines, it doesn't destroy. To evolve, you must stop worshipping who you've been. The habits that once protected you are now prisons. The roles that once defined you now confine you. The Stoic understands that destruction is sacred when it clears the path for truth. He doesn't ask, "How do I save myself?" He asks, "What in me must die so I can live right?" That's the question only the brave ever answer. Transformation isn't clean. It's chaos dressed as opportunity. You'll lose friends who only knew your old shape, dreams that no longer fit your soul, and versions of yourself that begged for validation. But in the quiet that follows, you'll feel something new. Peace without identity. You'll stop needing to be seen and start needing to be real. That's the rebirth Stoicism prepares you for. So when life sets your identity on fire, don't run. Let it burn. Don't try to save what's already finished. The ashes will not bury you. They'll feed you. From them, you'll rise, not as who you were, but as who you always were beneath it all. That's the Stoic resurrection, calm, clear, and untamed. Number 8, rise without bitterness. The hardest part of loss isn't rebuilding, it's doing it without hate. Bitterness whispers that you're justified, that revenge will heal what was broken. But vengeance is just pain disguised as purpose. The Stoic refuses to let his heart rot under resentment. He knows that to rise angry is to remain enslaved. True power is rising clean, with peace sharper than rage. You can't rebuild if your mind is still at war with the past. Every thought soaked in resentment poisons the foundation of your new life. The Stoic rebuilds not to prove anything, but to embody something, strength without cruelty, wisdom without ego. He knows that calm is more terrifying to his enemies than fury ever was. Peace is the highest form of defiance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That's the heart of this truth. The Stoic doesn't mirror the world's ugliness. He refines it into grace. Every act of serenity is a rebellion against chaos. Every moment of forgiveness is a weapon against despair. Bitterness wants reaction. Stoicism gives reflection. That's how you win without fighting. When you rise with peace, you confuse the universe. The world expects you to break, to retaliate, to become what hurt you. Instead, you return steady, detached, unbent. That calmness disarms everything that sought to destroy you. The Stoic understands that forgiveness isn't about others, it's about reclaiming space inside your own mind. Freedom begins where resentment ends. To rise without bitterness is not weakness, it's mastery. It's refusing to let darkness write your story. The world will try to define you by your pain. Stoicism teaches you to define yourself by your response. You become a mirror of strength, reflecting not suffering but transformation. You rebuild with love where hate once ruled, and that's how you ascend above circumstance. So stand tall, rise quietly. Let your peace speak louder than your wounds. You owe no one your anger, only your example. Rise not to prove, but to serve, to show what strength looks like when purified of pride. That's how you end the cycle and begin the legend of your own renewal. You've walked through the ashes now, and seen that nothing you lost was ever truly yours. What broke only revealed what was weak. What survived was you. The Stoic path is not about winning life's battles, but mastering the battlefield within. Every fall, every silence, every scar has brought you closer to what cannot be taken. Your mind, your virtue, your peace. That's the wealth the world can't steal. Now the question is simple. Will you stay awake? Will you let comfort dull you again, or will you live like one who has already been reborn? The Stoic life is not about control, it's about command. You command your reactions, your focus, your meaning. You rise not once, but every single day, through small acts of order against chaos. That's how you honor the loss, by turning it into strength. If this message spoke to your soul, write the word renewal in the comments. That one word tells me you've seen what fire can take and what it can't. Support this channel by liking the video, subscribing, and joining a community of minds built on discipline and clarity. And when this ends, click the video on your screen. Keep walking the Stoic path, where silence sharpens, struggle purifies, and peace becomes power. Imagine this, you're 35, maybe 45, or 65. Every morning you wake up, go to work, eat, talk to people, yet deep down you know, you're not living, you're just existing. You're tired, but you don't know why. You've got stability, but your soul feels hollow. You share your life with someone, yet there's no real connection anymore. Everything moves on autopilot, as if you've been sleepwalking through your own life. And one day, you look in the mirror. You see a stranger staring back, dull eyes, heavy shoulders. A voice inside whispers, "Where did I go?" But what you're feeling isn't just a problem of the modern world. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man alive, once wrote in Meditations, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does." Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, confessed he wrestled with anxiety, anger, and the sense that time was slipping away. And Epictetus, a slave-turned-philosopher, taught that freedom is not achieved by having everything, but by needing less. 3 men, 3 paths, 1 timeless truth. If your mind is lost, begin with the mind. If your body is broken, begin with the body. If your heart feels empty, begin with the heart. 3 brutal rules, 3 roads to rebuild yourself, 3 levels of rebirth. These are the 3 Stoic rules we're about to uncover. Principles that can rebuild your life from the inside out. But only if you're brave enough to live them. Let's begin. Rule 1. Fix the mind. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet, today, most people have surrendered that power. Our minds no longer belong to us, they belong to the noise. News cycles, social media, endless comparison. We scroll, we react, we consume, until the inner voice that once guided us falls silent. Your mind has become a battlefield, and you didn't even notice the invasion. 1. Detox the mind. You can't build a new life using old thoughts. You can't feed your brain with junk and expect clarity. Just as a strong body can't thrive on fast food, a strong mind can't thrive on mental garbage. So here's the challenge: 7 days. For the first 30 minutes of every morning, feed your mind truth, not trash. Read philosophy. Read the lives of those who overcame the impossible. Study skills that make you sharper, calmer, more resilient. Don't call it reading, call it training. Because your mind is either your greatest weapon or your worst prison. And every scroll, every thought, every reaction decides which one it becomes. 2. Redefine the direction. Most people say, I want to be happy. I want to be successful. But the Stoics knew happiness isn't the goal. It's the side effect of living with virtue. Don't ask, what do I want to have? Ask, who do I want to become? When you say, I want to lose weight, you focus on outcome. When you say, I am someone who honors my body, action follows identity. That's not habit change, that's identity shift. Write this down. I am becoming. Then, finish the sentence not with who you wish to be someday, but with who you choose to be today. Because transformation doesn't happen in the future, it happens now, with every small decision you make. 3. Break the invisible prison. I can't. I'm not good enough. It's too late. These aren't facts, they're walls. And the cruelest part? You built them yourself. The Stoics called this ascent the act of agreeing with the lies your fear whispers. But the moment you stop agreeing, you begin to break free. Write down the 3 beliefs that hold you back. Then rewrite each one as a declaration of power. I don't have time becomes I'm learning to prioritize what matters. I'm not smart enough becomes I'm developing the skills I need. It's too late becomes every moment is a new beginning. Each rewritten sentence is a hammer striking the wall of your old identity. Each word a crack that lets light in. 4. The mind training ritual. Every morning, write 3 thoughts that strengthen you and 3 that weaken you. Throughout the day, catch the negative ones the moment they appear and replace them with something true. At night, ask yourself, did my mind serve me today, or did it sabotage me? This isn't about thinking positive, it's about thinking with discipline. It's the mindset of a warrior, calm under fire, clear in chaos, unshaken by noise. Because when you master your mind, you master your fate. When you command your thoughts, you command your reality. So say this to yourself, not as a quote, but as a vow. My mind is my kingdom, and I am its sovereign ruler. And from this moment on, no one rules it but you. Rule 2. Fix the body. Your body is the foundation of your soul, the vessel that carries your mind and your purpose through life. You can't maintain a strong mind while living inside a weak body. The Stoics knew this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each dawn. At daybreak, when you find it hard to get out of bed, remember, you were born to act as a human being. And so he rose, not because it was easy, but because discipline was his nature. 1. Nutrition is discipline. Your body is not a trash bin. Every bite you take is a choice to strengthen yourself or to sabotage your potential. Before every meal, ask yourself, will this bring me closer to the person I want to become, or keep me chained to who I used to be? Don't aim for dieting, aim for awareness. Because when you control the fork, you begin to control your life. You don't have to chase perfection, just consciousness. Every conscious choice rewires the connection between your body and your willpower. Food can either fuel your purpose or feed your weakness. Choose with intention. 2. Sleep is the energy of wisdom. Seneca once warned, it's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Every late night you trade for another episode, another scroll, another distraction you steal from tomorrow's strength. No one ever built greatness with a tired mind and a foggy soul. Sleep is not laziness, it's recovery. 7 to 8 hours every night, not as a luxury, but as a ritual of self-respect. When you sleep well, your thoughts sharpen, your emotions balance, and your willpower resets. Protect your rest like a warrior sharpens his sword, because your future depends on how you restore today. 3. Movement is emotion. Emotion lives in the body, and it stagnates when you stay still. You're anxious? Walk. You're angry? Run. You're lost? Lift something heavy. Breathe deeply. Feel your heart beating again. Epictetus, though crippled, taught, no great thing is created suddenly. So move daily, even for 20 minutes. No gym needed, no expensive gear, just discipline. Climb the stairs, do squats, stretch, take cold showers. It's not the movement itself, it's the message you send to your own mind. I am still in command. Each act of movement, no matter how small, is a silent declaration of power. 4. The practice of voluntary discomfort. The Stoics had a sacred idea: voluntary discomfort, choosing hardship on purpose to grow stronger. Seneca would sleep on the floor just to remind himself he could live without luxury. Marcus trained his body in the chaos of war, not in the comfort of palaces. And you? Every time you choose ease, you teach yourself to break promises. Every time you choose challenge, you teach yourself to trust your own strength. So start small, drink one more glass of water, take that cold shower, run for 10 minutes, eat vegetables instead of sugar. Tiny choices, massive transformation. Because every act of discomfort builds a quiet, unshakable faith in yourself. Write this down, not as motivation, but as devotion. My body is my temple, and I am its loyal guardian. Now, rise and act like it. Rule 3. Fix the heart. Have you ever felt empty, even when life looks fine from the outside? That's not weakness. That's a silent signal your heart has gone numb. You built walls to protect yourself from pain, but walls don't just keep out the hurt, they keep out the joy too. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves break, it stands firm, and the raging waters fall still around it." A strong heart is not the one that never feels pain. It's the one that stays open, even after being broken. 1. Find your heart again. Sit still. No phone, no music, no distractions. Then ask yourself 3 questions. If I could not fail, how would I live? What am I pretending not to care about when deep down I care deeply? And when no one is watching, who am I, really? Don't run from the answers that make your chest tighten. That trembling is proof you're still alive. Write down what you hear, because those words aren't just thoughts, they're whispers from your soul, begging to be heard. You don't rediscover your heart by chasing pleasure, you rediscover it by listening to the silence beneath your noise. 2. Let go of the weight. Your heart carries too much luggage from the past. Anger, guilt, regret, fear, disappointment. Those things aren't you, they're just stories you've been replaying for too long. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you that hurts, but how you react to it." So tonight and for the next 30 nights, write one thing you forgive. Forgive a person, forgive yourself. Not because they deserve peace, but because you do. When you let go, you don't become weak, you become weightless. Forgiveness isn't surrender, it's liberation. It's the art of putting down the chains you were never meant to carry. 3. Live with purpose. A heart without direction will always wander in darkness. The Stoics called it sympathia, the idea that every soul is connected to every other. Marcus wrote, "What harms the hive harms the bee." You were never meant to live just for yourself. The heart beats to serve, to give, to connect. Purpose is not something you find. Purpose is something you create through action. So, pay attention. When do you feel most alive? When you help someone, when you create, when you teach, share, or love. Those moments are clues, the compass of your heart pointing you home. Start small. Help one person. Create one act of kindness. Don't wait for perfection. Start with sincerity. Because a heart that gives never runs empty. It expands, it overflows, it becomes unbreakable. Write this down and mean it. My heart doesn't just beat to live. It beats to love, to serve, and to connect. And when you live that truth, your heart will never go numb again. Now that you understand the essence of the three principles, the question is, are they connected? These three rules do not stand alone. They form a circle of rebirth. When you fix your mind, you give direction to your body. When you train your body, you build strength for your heart. And when you open your heart, you fuel the fire that keeps your mind alive. The mind is your compass, the body, your vessel, the heart, your flame. If one collapses, the journey falls apart. But when all three move in harmony, you become unstoppable. Marcus battled anxiety. Seneca doubted himself. Epictetus lost his freedom, yet found inner peace. None of them were perfect. They were simply relentless. Each day, one choice, one step forward, and that was enough to change history. You don't need to be flawless. You just need to show up every single day and stay loyal to your path. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, a man named James hit rock bottom, burned out at work, disconnected from his family, drowning in self-doubt. One morning, he decided to rebuild himself the Stoic way. He began by fixing his mind 30 minutes of reading Marcus Aurelius instead of scrolling. Then his body cold showers, daily runs, disciplined sleep. Finally, his heart forgiving his father, volunteering at a shelter, learning to love through service. Months later, his life didn't just change, his energy did. He stopped chasing happiness and started embodying it. He became calm, grounded, unshakable. That is the power of the three Stoic rules, not as philosophy, but as daily practice. Because transformation isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. Mind, body, heart. When they move as one, nothing can break you. Conclusion: fix your mind and you'll fix your life. Train your body and you'll free your soul. Heal your heart and you'll never lose your way again. You were not born merely to survive. You were born to awaken. The world doesn't need another copy, it needs you. The raw, honest, powerful, unbreakable version of you. And once you begin this path, you'll realize something profound. There is no old life to go back to. There's only the new life waiting for you to rise and claim it. So, write this deep into your mind. I am the author of my own transformation. I am the warrior of my mind, the guardian of my body, and the protector of my heart. Now stand tall. Take a deep breath. Feel that quiet fire inside you. And take your first step, not tomorrow, not someday now. Your journey doesn't begin when life gets easier. It begins when you decide you're ready to grow stronger. And if this message speaks to you, don't just watch it, live it. Share it with someone who needs to wake up too. Leave a mark, not just a view. Hit like if this reminded you of your own strength. Subscribe so we can walk this Stoic path together every week. And in the comments, write just one sentence, a promise to yourself. I begin my transformation today. Because you can. Because you must. Because the world is waiting for the awakened you. Thank you for watching.